All right, well, thank you, Ben, for inviting me. This is truly an honor. And what I will do is present work that I've been doing with esteemed colleagues that are shown on this slide here. So I'll present work at the intersection of two fields, human language technology or natural language processing, and cybersecurity in a new cross-disciplinary field called cyber NLP. So first, some definitions. Social engineering is human interaction between an attacker or social engineer and a target or potential victim. And in social engineering, an attempt is made to extract confidential information or gain access to systems, often for financial gain. So there are two levels. Social engineering at the individual level involves human interaction with a single target, say in an email or in a message, that generally involves deception to manipulate the individual into responding under various pretexts and potentially divulging personal information for fraudulent purposes. Social engineering also occurs at the mass level for broad dissemination of scams or misinformation, often through viral social media posts. So, question is, how can human-centered AI help? Well, first, an important definition, active defense, is a strategy to mitigate or eliminate the risk of harm to the potential victim through interaction. And I'm using the term active. This contrasts with standard passive defenses, such as ignoring or blocking the social engineering attack. So human-centered AI can help at the individual level with AI chatbots or agents that can assist the human, not take over for the human, but assist the human to apply conversational moves and defend against individual attacks and potentially even identify the attacker, or at least where they may be hiding. At a mass scale on social media platforms like Facebook, AI can be a tool to defend against social engineering, not through censorship, but through interjection of verifiable counterpoints validated by respected sources. So I'll show a real example in a moment, but first, a couple of additional definitions, and it was alluded to a little bit earlier, actually. Thank you for that. Phishing is a technique generally achieved through mass dissemination of the same communication to trick victims into engaging in a way that compromises sensitive data. And it turns out that about 3% of phishing emails are opened, and of those that are opened, there's only a 5% success rate. But spear phishing is targeted. It's at the individual level. It actually requires research about potential victims. And I'll use the acronyms that are shown at the bottom of this slide because we're going to need them later. Here, the social engineer, or SE, may pose as a trusted individual and engage customized communications with a potential victim, or PV. So 70% of those types of messages are actually opened with a 50% success rate of those that are opened. So this is a big deal. So let's look at an example that many of us, unfortunately, are probably familiar with, where the SE poses as a trusted individual who engages with and potentially dupes the PV into trusting them and complying with their requests. This is the notorious "Are you available" scam, and I want to especially acknowledge my colleagues listed at the bottom of the slide who have worked with me very hard on this problem in the DARPA ACID program. So what does it look like? First of all, you need to know that in this example, we actually decided to play along for several weeks. And frankly, our team found it fascinating. And we have Tomek Strzelkowski to thank for this idea of playing along. He's actually in this meeting as well. So the communication starts with a few lightweight conversational, I hope you can see my mouse, questions by the SE. The SE is actually posing in this case as the dean of the college. It's a very common ploy. Are you available? And sorry for disturbing. Are you available? I want you to help me with something. Sort of the types of postings that you might see from a bot. So maybe there's not even a human in the loop yet, but shortly we'll see the human does pick up the ball once things get rolling. Meanwhile, the PV, and that's actually our team, we're pretending to be a potential victim, responds non-committally with, "Hey, what's up?" Okay, what is it? And also confirming deception with questions like, everything okay with the project? The SE then reveals what we call the ask. This is the social engineer's demand, which is, in this case, to go buy 5 $100 gift cards from the store. And interestingly, they want actual physical cards. And this specific request is noted by our team playing the PV and later leveraged as a stalling technique. So at this point, the PV hangs out for a week. This actually went on for a long time, does not respond. And then finally, this is the part I found the most fascinating. The SE chimes in again and actually gets impatient and doesn't for one moment suspect that the PV is already onto them, imagining that his or her authoritative role is compelling the PV to respond. Very interesting. Okay, so the PV responds having hatched a plan that will now be implemented unbeknownst to the social engineer. And we correspond back and forth. And I should mention that each exchange, although very short, is an actual separate email, sometimes with a week-long lapse in between. Hey, still need those cards? Or still want those cards? SE says, yes, have you get it? And I'm not correcting typos. Those are real, and they're actually indicative of an attack. PV, sure, where to send them? SE, send them here for me. Attach it with massage here, okay? SE, just scratch it and take a picture of them and attach it to the email. Tend it to me here, okay? PV, you said you needed physical cards, and that's referring back to the earlier exchange. Need your mailing address to send. SE, send it for me here now, okay? PV, this is again continuing to stall. And where is here? Your home address? SE, I mean here, not my house. Just take pictures of each of them and send it okay. As the story unfolds, we see that the SE is getting more impatient, demanding that the PV send an image of the card over email. Some more time goes by, and a few days later, the PV finally does have a card, or at least claims to have one, but actually inserts an image of a fake gift card off the internet. Note that the SE actually gets more aggressive as their grammaticality plummets, and then demands that the PV send an image of the scratched off code on the back fast. And this is my bold facing. They apparently, they're not holding back at all. They're acting like an authoritative superior. And so you'll see fast a lot in this, and another week passes and the SE pushes again, demanding that the card be sent fast. And you can see fast is showing up all over this slide. The PV stalls, citing security concerns over sending the cards via email, and finally does send an image of the back of the card partially scratched off. So this is the image here. And so the SE brusquely complains that the code is not scratched off well enough, and that the PV only sent one card instead of 5 cards. So there's an interesting psychological phenomenon here. The socio-behavioral context is one where the SE is impersonating someone whom the PV should regard as a higher up, a dean in this case. And so the SE counts on the authority effect. And I was astounded that the attacker is not prepared for counter deception. And meanwhile, the SE has been snookered, because by clicking on this image that we provided to them, they executed JavaScript embedded in a JPEG image and unwittingly enabled the gathering of the data shown here. And we can see they're on an Android device in Central Europe or West Africa, and other information is shown here, such as the language and connection type. And as you might imagine, additional information could be sought out using this technique, but we stopped right here, having learned a whole lot about the mindset of the social engineer, and also possible techniques that we can employ as active defense against attacks, perhaps through an assistant who intervenes to deflect or unveil the attacker if the user so desires. So what did we learn? We learned from this and related studies that we conducted that I haven't shown you, that people fall for relatively simple social engineering attacks, And this is related to well-studied phenomena such as principles of influence described by Robert Cialdini, but most notably in the case we were looking at, the principle of authority figures heavily into this example and leads to this next element, which is social status vulnerability. It turns out explicit persuasion would not be needed if the PV actually believed that the SE is who they say they are. An authority figure in the PV's professional setting is a perfect breeding ground for inducing vulnerability. And I've actually heard recently of some cases where this succeeded in a big way. Happily, attackers do not expect deception or any form of active defense, and that's the most surprising outcome of all, at least to me. The PV, in fact, has an advantage that can be leveraged for outsmarting the SE, and that's an important aspect we can harness in building a system to counterattacks. So how do we apply what we learned to build a human-centered AI system? As we were seeing, each interaction with the SE has some form of explicit or implicit demand, or what we call an ask. And it's important to note that an ask isn't necessarily a question. For example, click here is an ask. So our team has identified two asks, give and perform, in the social engineering domain. Give is triggered in this case by the SE's use of the word want 5 $100 gift cards. Perform in this example is triggered by the word contact, not for the one I just showed you, but others that we had, where they say contact me and provide an email address. We've coupled ask detection with another important element, framing detection, to determine the risk or reward that the PV perceives to be associated with the SE's asks, if they are who they say they are. And we've identified two framings. One is lose, triggered in the example shown here by the word miss, that you would miss this rebate offer of 20%. And the other is gain. You could get up to a 20% discount. So it turns out that the combination of ask and framing, coupled with structural information about the communication channel, provides a perfect springboard for producing a response should the human desire to employ such intervention. So always the human can control this situation. And this example is actually representative of our team-developed system in DARPA, ACID, ASED, by the way, not ACID. The SE's prompt is addressed here to school employees. Did you know that you may be able to get up to a 20% discount, which is the framing, and is followed by click here to check your eligibility, which is the ask. We leverage those two inputs to produce an AI response, and this is presented to the human for their approval. They may or may not use it, they may or may not edit it, they may throw it away. But in any case, the response based on check eligibility, the system says, good to know, how do I go about the process of checking eligibility? And next, the response incorporates time wasting, which I alluded to in the earlier example, to stall for additional information gathering opportunities. The website is not opening. And finally, active defense is implemented by sending a new link to covertly verify the attacker's identity. Did you provide me the correct link? Is this the one? Okay. So that was spear phishing at the individual level, but my final thoughts pertain to generalization of these individual social engineering techniques to mass scale applications. So on social media, bots churn out posts that later go viral, and some of these are scams. The example shown here on the right, the original bot post, is a true story with company names changed. The original bot post refers to Telcograph's shocking 2015 deal. And unlike email, where a conversation can lag for days or weeks or months, social media posts have a much shorter time frame before a targeted audience is impacted. And here we see that people are already talking about this, this deal, the shocking deal that Sylvia here mentions. And Jim chimes in, I definitely could use a deal like this, sharing the post, and they provide the original bot post. So time is of the essence, and the question is, how do we exploit AI technology to counteract this before it spreads broadly? And so a counterpoint here produced by an AI system would be one way of doing that, where the AI system scours the web, find a trusted source, build a counterpoint. Wonky Time is a game site. Supply credit card number and pay $129 a month for a 1 in 500 chance of winning a free phone. This is the scam, and then an authoritative link is provided. So how would we get here? Well, framing and ask detection are applied to deduce from the original bot post and the subsequent conversation. The framing here is a gain of a new cell phone, and the ask is a payment of $1. Taken together with a reputable source that contains solid counter evidence, both validated information and a plausible intent of the original poster can be extracted to build the legitimate counterpoint shown here. Right, so that example illustrates construction of a counterpoint or a scam. For a scam, but in this age of COVID-19, I've been recently looking at similar techniques for social media conversations associated with misinformation campaigns. For example, anti-vaccine posts and memes that express fears of dangers to health and loss of free choice. And this is particularly a matter of current day relevance as the world awaits a COVID-19 vaccine. And as in the prior example, there are multiple social media conversations that refer to things like purported hydroxychloroquine benefits as an alternative to vaccines, or the FDA's rush to approve vaccines, or antifreeze in vaccines, or the flu shot increasing COVID-19 risk. So from these, it's possible to extract society-level framings, for example, the notion of losing free choice or danger to health for the framing, and a call to action, fight mandatory vaccines for the ask. And as before, reputable sources are needed to provide validated counter evidence and a plausible intent of the original poster, for example, possible foreign influence in amplifying the vaccine debate. So taken together, these enable the construction of a legitimate counterpoint as shown here, which cites FDA warnings against hydroxychloroquine, explains the FDA protocol for approval, debunks the antifreeze myth, debunks the connection between flu shots and COVID-19, and also cites an NIH report of concurrent foreign influence aimed at amplifying the vaccine debate. So I have a few final points, and I'll leave this up for discussion. I described how AI is used to build a counterpoint before too much damage is done, but keep in mind that any automation would need to be in the control of the end user. The human chooses what aspects of the system to enable and can approve or edit any AI-generated responses. So one might reasonably ask, is censorship a better option? And this is heavily debated in public forums and news outlets, for example, banning anti-vax posts. But the question is this socially responsible? Some have argued that social media cannot be a vehicle for misinformation. Others have argued that misinformation is a bigger problem than censorship can solve, and also that readers are likely to object to an automated judgment as to what is or isn't misinformation. So what are alternatives to censorship? It has been said that the best way to tackle misinformation is with information and let the human decide. And I've expanded on that theme with a human-centered approach that involves detecting misinformation automatically, but then provisioning the human author with a counterpoint from verifiable trusted sources. And the human may choose to insert the counterpoint into the conversation. If it is posted, human readers get to decide among the different perspectives presented to them. And I just want to thank the teams, the Panacea team and the Perfecta team from 2 DARPA-funded projects. And back to the items I had posted.